Are you searching for teacher CPD that leads to change, illuminates best practice and inspires your staff? Well, look no further. InnerDrive's Teacher CPD Academy is just what you need. The Teacher CPD Academy now also includes our Teaching Unpacked series, with Doug Lamoff exploring and analysing what great teaching looks like in the classroom. Email us now at tnt@innerdrive.co.uk to grab a free trial. tnt@innerdrive.co.uk.
Welcome to TandTeaching, the educational podcast you can listen to with a cup of tea. My name's Arthur Moore, and with me, as always, it's Mike Harrowell. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Arthur. How are you?
I'm very good, buddy. How are you today?
Yeah, really good, really good. Really excited to be talking.
Yeah, no. Well, very good, Michael Harrowell. That was very good. Yes, so we are doing a mini-series, all our listeners, on Oracy and education. But as always, don't worry, it's not just me and Mike you have to listen to. That would be awful, wouldn't it, Mike?
Yes.
For you above our listeners. So, Mike, do you want to hear who's joining us for the next 3 episodes?
I know, but yes, please tell me as well.
Yeah, well, but we're trying to create the illusion here, Mike. This is show business, Mike. This is what they call show business. So, Mike, we've got someone who we've been trying to get on the pod for, genuinely, I'd say about 3 years we've been trying to get this person on. So, Mike, we've got Yamina Bibi joining us. Yamina is, I've got a big list here. Yamina is an author. She's a super experienced senior school leader. She's an amazing English teacher. She is a coach, an educational consultant. She's got a master's in teaching. She's a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. She's the network lead for Women Ed. I could keep going on because there's literally loads about her on her About Me page on her website. But I can say, welcome to TandTeaching. Yamina, welcome.
Hello, hi Arthur, hi Mike. Thanks for having me.
We've genuinely tried to get you on the pod, I think now for a few years proper. We've had a couple of little chats in conferences and kind of here and there, but we finally got you on the pod proper. And it's lucky we've got you on, Yamina, because we are talking about a topic I know you are know so much about. I'm going to have so much information to give to our listeners. So I'm going to kick us straight off, and I'm just going to ask the question of, Yamina, what do we mean by this term oracy in our world of education?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a kind of love of mine, just because I think it's just really powerful and important in the classroom. But I did a bit of research for a Sec Ed supplement, actually, and it was Andrew Wilkinson in the 1960s who came up with this term and coined the term oracy, which a lot of people think is quite new. It really isn't. I mean, it goes back to the 90s. And he talked about it being kind of significantly raising the profile of elaborated speech and it being really specifically taught in English, rather than just this kind of discussion or debate. So that's what he didn't coin oracy as something that's just about debate or discussion. He said it was also about raising their profile. And then when we go into Voice 21, which is kind of the expert or has been really leading the research on oracy, Voice 21, they kind of define it as this ability to almost articulate ideas, to develop this almost this understanding and engagement, but specifically through spoken language. And the Oracy Education Commission kind of said something similar, really. So that's how I think the researchers or the educationalists would describe oracy. I think for me, it's very similar. It's about how we teach young people, or how we talk, how we speak, we listen, and how we explicitly actually teach that to the young people in our classrooms and in our schools as well.
Mike, in kind of your role at the moment, is this a big topic that is still talked about when you talk to within your school, within your trust, when you go and talk to other teachers? Is oracy one of those things that keeps coming up again and again?
Yeah, there was a quote we visited during one of our staff trainings, which was, I can't do it verbatim, but it was essentially along the lines of, if we teach our students anything, it should be oracy, in terms of those what we would deem soft skills. Because if you can articulate your thoughts, it's a lot easier to then engage in a conversation about what you're doing, maybe address a misconception you've got, support other people. So yeah, it's something we're working on as a school at the moment, definitely, because we see the benefit, and all the research says what a massive benefit there is to students being able to, elaborate their thoughts.
And I think it's one of those things that traditionally we just say that goes on in the English classroom. We'll let them take care of it, and then if they can read well, then that maybe helps me. Is that That's a really limited view, isn't it, Yamina, of what we are supposed to be meaning by this? And that's not what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone, people just think it's just speaking and listening, and we do it. If we do turn and talk, we do think, pair, share, then that's oracy. But actually, the research kind of refutes that or challenges that and says, no, it's more than that. It's explicit teaching of what effective communication is like. I mean, Ros Wilson, in her new book, that oracy is not just speaking and listening, argues that actually oracy is about teaching almost the performance, the phraseology, the language, the passion. And it's not just speaking and listening, and therefore is not just the English teacher's burden. As an English teacher, we felt that burden, particularly, in the last specification where speaking and listening was actually graded, and then Michael Gove decided to take that away. I think that actually had really serious implications on the ways in which schools source oracy and source speaking and listening, and the kind of importance of that. Because by taking that grading away, essentially what we're saying is all that matters is English, reading and writing, and nothing else, when actually we know that at the heart of every kind of curriculum, whether it's English or beyond that, is speaking and listening, is, like Mike is saying, able to articulate those ideas, with that kind of content knowledge and that curricular knowledge.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here as a PE specialist, Yamina, and you say it's like the bread and butter of our subject, because they don't have pen and paper or necessarily mini whiteboards out in the field. It's so important in our subject. And, we could talk about other subjects, things like music, drama. It's, if you can't talk about your thoughts, you're going to really, really struggle to access the kind of theoretical aspect of that subject. Can you just talk to us about, because something I'm really passionate about is oracy creates good literacy. You can't be good at writing, I don't believe, unless you've got really good oracy. Can you just talk us through whether I'm right or wrong on that, and kind of what the thinking behind that is?
Yeah, I agree. I think, when we really look at what oracy means, there's the Oracy Education Commission actually do a really great piece and a bit of research around breaking that down. So they say that oracy, and this is in line Voice 21 would say, essentially, I think it's the same, but that it's about learning to talk, listen and communicate. That's obviously linked to literacy. If you don't have the vocabulary, which is linked to literacy, part of oracy and being able to articulate your ideas is having the vocabulary to be able to do it, whatever the subject. And as somebody who used to line manage PE, Mike, I said this to you the other day, I've got a real soft spot for PE teachers, because I think line managing PE made me realize how much actually high-level vocabulary there is in PE, and people don't really know that or understand that. And I think that's with every subject. So definitely links to literacy in the sense that you need to be able to teach the young people. You need to explicitly teach tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary that helps them articulate those ideas first or foremost. It gives them the kind of toolkit to be able to express those ideas. The other thing is, I think great primary teachers do this really, really well, and so do great secondary school teachers, is that if our students can't articulate their ideas verbally, they're going to probably find it challenging to do it in writing. Now, I have to say, as somebody who's dyslexic, I loved when I was able to talk about my ideas, share those ideas first and foremost. And then by talking to my partner about it or talking in the class about it and expressing that, I could kind of hear what worked and what didn't and then write it down. And I know some teachers prefer, as an English teacher, sometimes it's easier to write and then talk. But we know that those two things are interlinked. Like those specific skills of talking, listening, and speaking are really, really important. And great effective literacy is about being able to give the young people the language, thinking about the linguistic element. Also, what Voice 21 would argue is almost that kind of social and emotional kind of capacity as well. That category, I think that's one of the 4 categories that Voice 21 break down kind of oracy skills in. Literacy is so much more than just that as well. Like, as somebody who used to lead literacy in my last school, we used to talk about this idea of reading fluency, echo reading, explicitly teaching that to our young people. That's literacy, but that's also oracy, I would say. That's, getting them to understand what it sounds like, what effective speech sounds like as well.
That also comes through to other subjects. So I know in maths, like sometimes I ask a student to explain an idea, and if they haven't got the language, the literal terminology to be able to explain it, they can't explain it. And I might often, like, not me, but a maths teacher or someone else might go, like, they need to learn these words, like, maybe we'll get them to write down. But sometimes it literally comes, we need to explicitly teach, like, these skills. And also, when a student talks out loud, it gives me an insight into their thinking process. So if they, don't have that skill to be able to articulate something, then it's really hard for me to gauge what is going on. It makes it really hard for me as a teacher. But also, if they don't have the language to articulate something, how do I expect them to use that language to write something down? And so it's like, it's one of those things that when you talk about it as we are now, it's really obvious that we should all be focusing on this. But I suppose there's still that traditional idea of speaking is in the English class, maybe a bit of drama, everyone else do your own thing. Is that still, I know work with a lot of schools. Is that something you're seeing change now overall?
Yeah, I think, a lot around disciplinary oracy has been implemented in some schools. I think schools still need to do a bit more work on it, because I think in some schools, not all schools, but in some schools, there is that traditional mindset, or kind of that, traditional mindset that speaking and listening is in the English classroom. And I think that's because the curriculum suggests it was, right? But we know when you look at disciplinary literacy and disciplinary oracy, Sarah Davies' book is really fantastic on that. But actually understanding what oracy looks like. What does it mean to speak like a geographer? What does it mean to speak like a mathematician? What does it mean to speak like a PE? That's that kind of element. That's a whole school approach, really, because you need to actually be able to map that as a whole school, give curriculum areas the opportunities and the time to be able to discuss what that actually means. And I have to say, one of my colleagues in my last Sarah Bennell school, Brenton Lagarda, just did an amazing job. He was a lead practitioner in maths, on like really honing that in mathematics, because a lot of people didn't think that's what maths was about. Maths is just about equations, right, and algebra. Actually, if you go into his class, honestly, if you go into any math teacher's classroom at Sarah Bennell School, they are getting the students to articulate their ideas using that kind of math-specific language and talking about what it means to speak like a mathematician. And that is really powerful stuff, I think. But I do think that needs to come from a whole school perspective. Individual teachers can do it in their classrooms, but once you, as a leader, say, no, this is a whole school approach, you're going to get more buy-in and more consistency in the approach.
Yeah, really interested there, Yamina. You talk a lot there about talking, and speaking and being able to, express yourself. But the other half of that was listening. Now, I know this is a massive question. How do we teach our kids to listen? There's probably every teacher and every parent listening, thinking, come on, tell me the trick. But is there something we can do, or something we should be doing to teach our students how to be good listeners?
Oh my God, yes, this is my favorite thing. So this is where my coaching element, I think, comes, like my kind of being a coach. Listening is such a key part of being a coach, because your job isn't to actually tell somebody or direct somebody like a mentor might. A coach's job is to literally listen and then to probe and ask kind of pertinent questions. I think that's what an effective teacher does, is they listen to their students, but they also teach listening explicitly. And, this idea of varying levels of listening, I think is really important. On Voice 21, in their kind of benchmark, or those kind of skills that we might teach young people, listening is one of those key elements. I've worked in schools where they've actually got things like listening ladders. So they actually explicitly teach students the varying levels of listening, because what we want is listening to understand rather than always listening to respond. And I think that's a really this is where my coaching hat is, because we know the most effective type of listening as a coach is to listen to understand. I think therapists probably say the same thing, to be honest. And I think being able to explicitly teach that, one of the things that we did in my school was we used to actually teach it as a form time, like a actual form time, explicitly teaching young people what does effective listening look like, and doing that as a whole school approach through form time, through PSHE. And then what teachers would do in their own curriculum classrooms, subject classrooms, is again have the listening ladder on the board while they're doing kind of oracy tasks or listening tasks or talking debates or whatever it is. Actually have the listening ladder and then assess students against it, or get them to peer assess it themselves against it, or each other against that listening ladder. I do think there's a real element that, particularly in an active classroom, you want students to talk all the time, right? You want to be able to, like you said, Arthur, be able to express their ideas, so we can then, as teachers, elicit kind of evidence of learning and then react, right? But actually, the most effective speakers are also sometimes the most effective listeners, because they're listening to understand what's happening and then to make their next move or decide what to do next. And I think that's what the most effective teachers do as well.
So in later episodes, we're going to be talking about what we can do from kind of a school-wide approach and also within our classrooms to kind of promote this. But I was talking about this topic just before pressing record, Yamina, with my wife, who's an English teacher, and she was saying she's noticed a difference between when the assessment changed recently. So the speaking element of the English language became its own separate thing rather than part of that. So it's like almost a separate exam and kind of not feeding into it. And that's, she says she's noticed that kind of just having a consequential approach, unfortunately, with everything, because everything is revolved around that kind of GCSE grade. Is that something you've kind of noticed, just to give our listeners kind of a bit of context of like why this is kind of, there's the fight for Oracy maybe at the moment in education?
Yeah, I really do think that was had a huge impact, not on just the English curriculum and actually whole school, because it was then almost this side thing, and it's not graded anymore. I mean, it's graded, but it's like distinction, merit, pass, and it's really bad to say, but I don't think the students value it as much, and teachers just don't have the time. Lots of schools that I've worked with either do it at the end of year 10 or the beginning of year 11 because it's just done, right? And then we give, like, some schools will just give like 2 or 3 weeks to this because there's just no time in the curriculum. We are time poor when it comes to kind of covering the GCSE curriculum anyway. And kind of the most effective schools will do it from year 7. They'll actually explicitly teach Oracy skills right from the beginning of year 7 so that it's not just a bolt-on. But in some schools, it is just a bolt-on in year 10, at the end of year 10 or the beginning of year 11. Let's just get it out of the way so we can continue with the rest of the actual GCSEs. You know, and because it's not graded from 1 to 9, or I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I'm just saying, you know, because it's not graded in the same way, I think schools don't value it. English departments just don't have the time to give it the time that it probably deserves. And the students don't value it either. And I think there is, and we'll talk about this probably in the next episodes, but there is a real kind of desire and a demand, I think, from English teachers, but also from whole schools, to give Oracy its place. Because without Oracy, like Mike said, nothing else will work. Like, you can't teach any of those other subjects without helping our young people be able to kind of communicate and express their ideas.
Without Oracy, there is nothing else. Feels like a nice place to kind of leave this episode, because then when we come back, we can talk about the everything else. So in the next episode, listeners, we are going to be very much talking about the strategies for a school, how they can implement this, whether that's an SLT level or maybe a head of department level. And then in the following episode from that, we'll talk about very much about your classroom and things that you can do right away with your students. So Mike, Yamina, I think we've set it up nicely. I think we've given ourselves a bit of context. We've talked about why this is important. Hopefully, listeners, if you weren't convinced beforehand, Yamina's convinced you that Oracy may have some role in this thing we call education. I think we should do this again, Mike and Yamina. What do you think?
Please.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, listeners, we'll be back next time on TandTeaching for part 2 with Yamina Bibi talking about Oracy in education.
Are you searching for teacher CPD that leads to change, illuminates best practice and inspires your staff? Well, look no further. InnerDrive's Teacher CPD Academy is just what you need. The Teacher CPD Academy now also includes our Teaching Unpacked series, with Doug Lamoff exploring and analysing what great teaching looks like in the classroom. Email us now at tnt@innerdrive.co.uk to grab a free trial. That's tnt@innerdrive.co.uk.